All right.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yep.
People want to come in. Okay, great. Okay, let's let them in. Thank you. I think we're good. Oh, yeah, 4 people. Okay.
And did you get a better angle so my stomach doesn't look so big?
You want me to move that a little bit forward?
Hold it in.
And as I sit down, someone's going to want to come in. It always happens, but we'll see. Okay. We'll just go. All right. Well, we're finally here. Thank you guys for getting here. Hey, Sandy. A little technical difficulties, not totally unusual. Okay, so this is the East Point Movie Critic Discussion Night. I appreciate everybody coming out. And those of you on Zoom, just raise your hand or wave, or I can't see the chat right now, but hopefully one of you can flag it if you see anyone wanting to contribute to the discussion. Since a lot of you on Zoom don't have your cameras on, you're going to have to put your camera on to wave your hand if you want to add something to the discussion so we can see you. But if not, you don't have to, and then you can just kind of leave it the way it is. But otherwise, we're not going to know you want to talk. Okay, so our tonight's movie discussion is American Graffiti. I hope everybody had a chance to watch it because we're definitely going to do spoilers. Okay. All right. Just a little housekeeping. Our next discussion will be September 28th. It's the 4th Thursday of the month, which is our usual one. And for everyone who's attending, and if you haven't signed in, Sandy, yet, please, I think everybody else signed in. Okay, good. Everyone who's here will get to vote on the movies. I'm going to submit a list of 9 to 12 movies, and you'll vote for the ones, and that'll be the one we do for September. So I am Ed Katz. I'm the host. Katzreviews.com is my website. I'm on Facebook and Twitter also. And tonight we're doing American Graffiti, the 1973 movie written and directed by George Lucas. So as we usually start, do you think this movie was well done? Hands up. Yes. Did anyone think it was not well done? Okay. Anyone in the middle? All right. So pretty much everyone thought it was well done. Okay, good. So now this is a different question. Did you like the movie? Yes.
I like the music.
Okay. All right.
Yes, and
Yeah.
All right. So mixed.
Yeah.
yes and no. I mean,
It's a little
music,
boring.
music and cars, but I watched it 2 days ago.
Okay.
It did get a little boring after partway into it.
All right. So it got a little,
Yeah.
to use a pun, I guess, dragged on a little
Yeah.
with the drag
This is
racers.
probably the best part, but by the way, he had his sister's Victrola, and that was the music.
He
Kept playing records from his sister's Victrola.
He who?
on his sister's Victrola.
Who is he? You're saying he?
Lucas. Lucas,
Oh, George Lucas. Okay, the director. Well, I didn't know if you meant one of the actors in the
No.
movie. Okay.
which is incredible. They were just records. Nobody spent a lot of money.
Well, they still had to get the rights, and actually, I'll get into that because that was complicated. His first cut of the movie was 3.5 hours long, and the rights would have been ridiculously expensive. He had to raise an extra $170,000 for the music rights, which
he did.
he got from family and friends. That ended up making a fortune because the movie made over $100 million and cost under $1 million. They did extremely well.
I think that if we were at the age when we saw it the first time,
Mhm.
we would have probably loved it a lot more than just the music and the cars.
No, I don't think so, because now you look back and you can see the perspective. When you're in it and you're living it, it's like, everybody does it the same thing. It's like, if somebody showed you East Point 50 years from now, us sitting around, it's like, no, that's what old people do. They sit around and they fill the time, And I think the perspective makes it interesting. It's all nostalgia.
You found us. Yeah, I know tonight was hard. I apologize. It's out of my control.
Not your fault.
Okay, so the movie got a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes from audiences in 84. So not quite as well loved by the audiences as the critics. Now, I will tell you though, to your point about being able to appreciate it more now, this was on the American Film Institute's list of 100 best films. When it first got put on, it was down like in the 90s. As the years went on, it's now in, I think, 66. So it's moved up in the 100 best American films ever made. So it's up there. But usually films go the other direction as new films come out and they bump some of the other ones down. But in this case, this one has actually risen in spite of the new films coming out. So that's, I thought, kind of significant. Also, George Lucas directed 6 movies in his entire career. He's been involved with many, many, many more, but he only directed 6. 4 of those were Star Wars movies. This one was the only one not a science fiction movie, and his first movie right before this, which is referenced on a license plate, was THX 1138, which was a relatively low budget, actually about the same budget as this movie, science fiction movie for about $750,000. And it's a good movie. It has Robert Duvall in it before he was famous. But John Milner's license plate on his Roadster is THX 138.
Right.
So Lucas put a reference into it, which I thought was kind of cool. The film received 5 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director for George Lucas. It didn't win any, by the way, but it was nominated for 5. The budget ended up being $777,000, and the box office worldwide was $140 million. Pretty good return on those people's investment. Now, Rotten Tomatoes, the consensus on their website says, one of the most influential of all teen films, American Graffiti is a funny, nostalgic, and bittersweet look at a group of recent high school grads' last days of innocence. Doing a little more research, it's not actually the last days, it's September 1st, 1962.
One day.
One day, really one day, one night, really. It's not actually a true story, but it is based on Lucas's experience as a teenager in Modesto, where the film's set, though almost all of it was not shot there. And the reason was Lucas went to Modesto to go shoot it, and he goes, it's changed too much, we can't do it here. So they went somewhere else. But he graduated from Downey High School, which in the film is called Dewey High School. Just made a slight change. He wasn't the only writer. It was also written with Willard. I don't know if I can pronounce his last name. It's spelled Huyck, Huck. I don't know. And Gloria Katz, no relation, I assure you, who wrote Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Lucky Lady, and Howard the Duck, which was absolutely terrible if you ever saw it. Huck and Katz were married, though uncredited. They added much of the humor to Star Wars as script doctors. He is currently 77. She died in 2018. So the film was released August 1st, 1973, basically 11 years after it was set, and 50 years ago this month. Okay. Lucas has largely retired from filmmaking since he has several companies, but he sold Lucasfilm to Disney in 2012 for $4.1 billion in stock and cash. He's now focused on philanthropy. His charitable family foundation has more than $1 billion in assets. He obviously created Star Wars, Indiana Jones. Yeah, he's one of the most successful filmmakers ever made. His films are among the 100 highest grossing movies in the North American box office, adjusted for inflation. Star Wars was number 4 of all time, adjusted for inflation. And interestingly, I thought Avatar or Titanic was number 1. They're 2 and 3. Adjusted for inflation, Gone with the Wind is number 1, which adjusted for inflation would be over $4 billion. Okay, so the film he made after this was Star Wars. So he was on a pretty good roll at that point. He produced and co-wrote the sequels, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. With Steven Spielberg, he created, produced, and co-wrote the Indiana Jones films, although he was only executive producer of the new one, Dial of Destiny. But Spielberg introduced him to the composer John Williams, who he worked with on all his films after that, but not this one. This one just used the soundtrack from 60s movies. Okay, let's see.
Did he have another company called Industrial Light and Magic?
He
Was that
did.
his-
He still does, I think. Industrial Light and Magic, and also THX, which is an audio company. And there may be one or two others as well. So he's known for classic hero journey arcs with innovative twists, and they tend to resonate with audiences across generations. Interestingly, he liked casting people who aren't famous. And Cindy Williams, who you remember here as Steve's girlfriend, Lori, she would have been cast as Princess Leia in Star Wars, but this movie made her too well known, and he ended up going with Carrie Fisher. I thought that was kind of funny. Now, the character of Steve was played by, of course, Ron Howard, who's had an unbelievable career, almost as successful as George Lucas. Obviously, you know, he was a child actor with Andy Griffith as Opie, right? The Andy Griffith Show. Over his 6-decade career, he's received 2 Academy Awards, 4 Emmy Awards, 2 Golden Globes, and a Grammy Award. He was awarded the National Medal of Arts in 2003 and was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame in 2013. He has 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for his contributions in both film and television. Interestingly enough, while he was doing the Andy Griffith Show, he was also in the music film, The Music Man, which I didn't remember. He was a kid, you know, little kid, credited as Ronnie Howard until then. And then, of course, Happy Days came. Now, American Graffiti came out in 1973. Happy Days came out in 1974. So you would think his appearance in American Graffiti helped get him and maybe Cindy Williams the role for Happy Days, because they were both, that she was in that too, and that launched Laverne and Shirley, and she was huge from that. But it was actually the other way around, because they shot the pilot for Happy Days before American Graffiti, and someone showed it to George Lucas, and that's how he got Ron Howard. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, Ron Howard wanted to be a director. He really didn't want to be doing acting. And no one would give him the chance to direct because he was so well known as Opie. That was what they thought of him as. They didn't want to give him credit to be a director. Roger Corman, the king of the B movies, cast him. He said, here, you want to direct a movie? Great. Here's what you got to do. First, you're going to be in this movie I'm making, low budget movie called Eat My Dust. It's a car racing movie, terrible. But he said, you do that, and then I'll let you direct a movie. He's not going to let him write it, but he was going to let him direct it, so he gets a directing credit. He also made him act in it. But the movie was called Grand Theft Auto. Spawned a huge video game franchise. Not a great movie, but that was his first feature film directing. And he did get to write the screenplay for that with his real life father, Rance Howard. And in that film was also Marion Ross. Does that ring a bell with anybody? She played his mother on Happy Days. And his younger brother, Clint Howard, was also in that movie. So in 1980, he left Happy Days to focus on directing, producing, and sometimes writing. And some of his films include Night Shift. Do you remember that movie? That was Michael Keaton's first major role, his breakthrough comedy role with Henry Winkler. And again, the connection, Happy Days, Henry Winkler was in the movie that he cast. Splash, of course, Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah. Cocoon, Willow, Backdraft, Beautiful Mind, Frost Nixon. I mean, he's done so many. Apollo 13, Cinderella Man, and the more recent last year, 13 Lives. How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which he also wrote. I mean, he's done so much. It's just, he directed the documentary The Beatles 8 Days a Week and a documentary on Pavarotti. Now, Richard Dreyfuss, does anyone remember all the movies he's been in?
Never seen.
Okay, because he's been in a ton. So American Graffiti was kind of his breakout, but he was actually offered a choice to play Kurt or Terry the Toad. And he chose to go with Kurt. But after this, he made Jaws, then Close Encounters of the Third Kind, so 2 Spielbergs, then The Goodbye Girl, The Competition, Stand By Me, Down and Out in Beverly Hills with Nick Nolte, Stakeout, What About Bob, which was very famous with, I believe that, if I remember right, it's Bill Murray also in that. And then Mr. Holland's Opus. He won Academy Awards for Best Actor for The Goodbye Girl. At the time, he was the youngest ever actor to win that. He was age 30. He also was nominated for Mr. Holland's Opus. He's won a Golden Globe, BAFTA, and many other awards. I saw him on stage in Westport Playhouse in 2003, All My Sons by Arthur Miller with Jill Clayburgh as his co-star. And they got that because Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward were running the theater, and they just called in favors, and these people would do whatever they wanted. So that's how they got them. Paul Lamette, he was John Milner, the racer. And he won a Golden Globe for New Star of the Year. And I thought he was phenomenal in this movie, but he kind of didn't really do much of note after this. He was in a bunch of things, many, many things, but nothing really prominent. His best known work is two Jonathan Demme films, Handle with Care and Melvin and Howard. He did win another Golden Globe for his performance in The Burning Bed in 1984. And then he was in The Puppet Master, which spawned a franchise. And his other big thing was he was in the Lonesome Dove TV series in the mid-90s, but not much, lots of TV spots too. Charles Martin Smith, Terry the Toad, okay? What happened to him? So he was in the Buddy Holly story. That was that and Never Cry Wolf were his big movies. He was in Starman, also with Jeff Bridges, The Untouchables with Kevin Costner, Deep Impact. As a director, he's known for The Snow Walker, Stone of Destiny, Dolphin Tale 2, A Dog's Way Home, and he's won some BAFTA nominations for directing. Cindy Williams, who just passed away at the beginning of this year, of course, Happy Days, Shirley Feeney. Right after American Graffiti, he was in Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation, which, if you've never seen it, is a really, really well done film. I may put it up for as a vote thing. Low budget movie, but Gene Hackman plays a government agent who's listening to things and like, what does he really hear? And it's very confusing as to what he hears. Is there a government conspiracy? Things like that. Anyway, so she's got a part in that. And then Candy Clark, who was nominated for Best Supporting Actress, she played Terry the Toad's girlfriend, sort of, in the movie. Debbie Dunham was her character's name. So she was nominated. And she was also in the 1976 film, The Man Who Fell to Earth. Her first acting role was in John Huston's film, Fat City, the year before this. And she was also in a remake of The Big Sleep with Robert Mitchum in 1978, Blue Thunder, Amityville 3D, a remake of The Blob. And she was with Matt Damon in The Informant in 2009. But she's also been on shows like The Dating Game and lots of TV shows, Magnum, PI, Banachek, Matlock, things like that. She dated Jeff Bridges for several years after they met on the set of Fat City. Didn't marry him. She was married to Marjo Gortner. Do you remember Marjo Gortner? Anyone remember him? He was an actor, very handsome guy, who had a very kind of flame out career, and he became like an evangelist priest. And there was a scandal about it because he was like taking people's money. So they were only married for a year. She then married a guy named Jeff Wall, and she was married to him for a year, and that was it.
Not long standing.
Yeah, she was kind of flighty with her weddings, unfortunately. Okay, and then Wolfman Jack. Anyone remember Wolfman Jack? Okay, all right. So there was an interesting story. I want to get into how he got into this movie because I think it was Francis Ford Coppola suggested it. I want to find it. Normally I get a couple pages of trivia on a movie. I couldn't believe how much there was on this movie. It's insane. And like half my pages here are about the trivia from the movie, and I want to find the Wolfman Jack one because it's pretty funny. Okay, Francis Ford Coppola, who, by the way, helped raise the needed money to finish this film. He's friends with George Lucas. He would later cast Cindy Williams and Harrison Ford also in The Conversation, which he produced, wrote, and directed the following year. Okay, so he served as producer for this movie while Lucas was the director. In 1988, they switched for the film Tucker, the Man in His Dream, about the car the guy who invented the non-mainstream car. Okay. I really want to find out about Wolfman Jack. All right, this is just a funny bit. So the role of Kurt, that Richard Dreyfuss chose. Originally, Butch Patrick was going to play Kurt. Does anyone remember who he was? Did you ever see The Munsters? He was Eddie Munster. So he was going to play it, but he didn't get it because he refused to cut his hair. Okay, how about that? So that's how Richard Dreyfuss got that one. Now you remember Mackenzie Phillips, who played the young girl, the underage girl with John Milner in the car. You know who her parents were, right?
John Phillips.
And Michelle Phillips.
Yeah.
Mackenzie Phillips. Her parents were Michelle Phillips and John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas.
Yeah.
And they were very busy with their music careers. Well, she got the part and they basically put her on a bus and sent her to go do the film. And then they didn't see her until it was over 6 weeks later.
How old was she?
She was a teenager. I'm trying to remember the exact age, but she was a teenager at the time. She claims not to have remembered Harrison Ford by name after appearing in this film with him. Now, he wasn't actually in the car with her, but he was in the car next door in a couple of the scenes. They had the water balloon thing and whatever. Years later, she heard the name in connection with the success of Star Wars. And then when she went to see it, she claimed to have recognized him only as the man who sold her marijuana. I mean, there's so many things to this movie. It's hysterical. But I gotta find the one about Wolfman Jack. I can tell you, Paul Lamont, again, the guy who played John Milner, ended up rushed to the hospital after suffering a walnut allergy flare-up after eating a Waldorf salad. All right, this is more relevant though. George Lucas has said that the three of the male leads represent various parts of himself. Kurt is his creative self. Milner is his gearhead car aficionado side, and noted that Lucas was nearly killed as a teenager when he crashed his Fiat sports car. Terry is his nerdy, awkward side. Lucas has said that the only male lead he couldn't relate to was Steve, the popular one. And even though Lucas is a giant in the film industry, he's actually only 5'6". He wanted his wife, Maria, to edit the film, but Universal's executive Ned Tannen insisted on hiring Verna Fields, by the way, very famous editor. She's not a slouch. She had just edited Sugarland Express. She worked on the rough cut of this and then left to resume work on What's Up, Doc, if you remember the Ryan O'Neal and Barbara Streisand comedy. Okay. Haskell, okay. Now, did you notice the visual style of the film? The look of the colors of the cars, even at night, they kind of almost glowed. Well, it wasn't a slouch they had as the cinematographer. They got Haskell Wexler, one of the best cinematographers ever, to be a visual consultant because they didn't have a budget to pay for him. So they, as a cinematographer with scale, he got visual consultant. But he basically did it from what I read. Oh, this is the only full-length feature film directed by George Lucas that does not begin with a big block of scrolling text. I mean, you remember all the Star Wars ones, they're famous, but he also did it in THX 1138. I mean, it was so low budget, Charles Martin Smith said that the principal cast sat on the curb when they were not in the scene because the film budget did not allow for chairs. George Lucas was inspired. Oh, here it is. It's number 62 on the American Film Institute's list. It moved up from 77. Okay, does anyone have anything they want to ask or put in at this point? Not yet? Okay. And one of the actors, and didn't say who, set fire to George Lucas's motel room. He was inspired, which is interesting, by the movie by Fellini called I Vitelloni, which is about 4 late teenagers in a town in Italy who haven't basically grown up. They're resisting growing up. And it translates roughly to like The Lazy Ones. That's a very rough translation. But I saw that movie. I just recently saw it. I saw it when I was in college, and I just saw it again because I studied Fellini in college. And I can see where it comes from. Especially the character of Kurt, who's grappling with whether or not to go away, and he can't make up his mind till like the last minute. Well, I got one note on Wolfman Jack, but it's not the right one.
What? That last scene when he's getting on the plane,
Mhm.
I should have written it down, the
Go ahead.
name of the airline
Okay,
was
yep.
strange.
Yeah, it was, and I have that somewhere too, but there's so much here, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find it. Okay, it was, Walter Murch assisted Lucas in post-production for the audio mixing and sound design. He suggested making Wolfman Jack's radio show the backbone of the film. I'll find it, because I know it's in here, about the plane. Okay, right, this is kind of an interesting part, because I remember I told you Verna Fields was brought in to edit. After she left, Lucas struggled with editing the film's story structure. He had originally written the script so that the 4 storylines were always presented in the same sequence. He called it an ABCD plot structure. So you'd see these characters, you know, the Steve thing, Terry the Toad, John Milner, and Kurt. But the first cut was 3.5 hours long, and in order to whittle it down to a more manageable 2 hours, so many scenes had to be cut and shortened or combined that the film structure became incredibly loose. And it no longer adhered to the original ABCD, which greatly disappointed. Are you able? There you go. Thank you. So it was initially budgeted by Universal to be a $600,000 budget. Coppola helped bring in the extra $175,000 once he signed on, and that allowed the studio to advertise the film as, quote, from the man who gave you The Godfather, which had come out the year before in '72. Okay, by the way, the Universal Studios really had a hands-off approach to this movie. They kind of didn't know what was going on until it was just about finished. And then, of course, it was pretty much too late. The executives from Universal hated it and thought it was going to be a dog. They originally were going to have it licensed to be a TV movie. They were that, they had that much lack of confidence in it. And they did an audience test, and the audience liked it, but they didn't believe it. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So the cars in the film are metaphors for their drivers. And I found this, I can't even remember where. This may have been an IMDb. The snooty girls are riding in a parent's Cadillac. John's car is wild, but essentially an outdated car. Steve's car is fairly powerful, but completely stock and conservative. Laurie's car, I didn't even remember Laurie had a car, but Laurie had a car, and it's an Edsel, which was intended to be forward-thinking and futuristic, but not in sync with the larger world beyond. Kurt's car is the strangest of all, a Citroën, a French car quirky and odd as the members of the Moose Lodge, in which, like Kurt, simply doesn't belong. The most telling of all is Toad's, which, like his life, is non-existent and represented by fantasy versions of himself, a respected car like Steve's, and a rugged, manly Jeep. John, as you saw, wears a white t-shirt and jeans, which was the uniform of the day for the tough kids with the custom hot rods. Not having a shirt pocket, he has a pack of cigarettes rolled in the sleeve of his shirt so they wouldn't be crushed. By the way, that was his sort of improvising. And the cigarettes being unfiltered Camels sort of completed it. Now, there's a scene where they go past a movie theater when the cop loses his rear axle. You remember where Kurt sabotaged it? Okay. The movie on the screen is Dementia 13, which was a Francis Ford Coppola movie. Although the timing wasn't right because it wasn't out in 1962, but they just put it up on the screen because it was his movie and he was a producer, so he was able to get that in there. A little plug for his movie. Oh, they wanted to use some Elvis Presley songs, but they had to get whittled out because Colonel Tom Parker was too tough to deal with. So that wasn't going to happen. Oh, here it is. Budgetary reasons forced George Lucas to drop the opening scene in which the blonde angel, and you all know who played the blonde angel in the movie?
Suzanne Summers.
Suzanne Summers, right? Thank you. Kurt's image of the perfect woman. In the beginning, originally, she drives through an empty drive-in cinema in her Ford Thunderbird. Her transparency revealing she does not exist. It's all in his mind. That's why he could never catch up to her. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
What about
Because he
phone
would
calls?
Right,
Yeah, who called?
that's the question. I don't know. You're right. What about the phone? I thought the exact same thing. What about the phone call?
It's an imaginary phone call.
Yeah, maybe it was, right? Okay. Oh, here it is. Okay. Mackenzie Phillips got the part of Carol when she was 12. Her parents put her on a plane with a suitcase and sent her on her way with no chaperone or arrangements for living while she filmed. The producer took her in and had to get a legal guardianship over her since she had no one there. Almost immediately after filming, her father, John Phillips, his wife at the time was Genevieve Wade, sent her off to a boarding school in Switzerland. When she returned, the film had been released, and she was shocked when people knew her from it. And by the way, Cindy Williams wanted to play that part. She said she'd even have braces put on. They said
I
no,
thought
she
she
was
was,
a little too
I
old.
thought it was one of the best in the film.
Yeah, art imitates
Yes.
life.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
makes
so
it like
the plane was a Douglas DC-7 at the end of the movie. It was previously owned by Grand Funk Railroad. There's so many things in this movie. Mark Hamill auditioned for a part. He didn't get it. But Lucas liked him enough, he remembered him, and when Star Wars came along, there he goes. Didn't really hurt him too badly. Yeah, the soundtrack originally had 80 songs, which they whittled down to 45, and including the ones they left out from Elvis. The band at the dance, the prom, I guess, Flash Cadillac and the Continental Kids. Real band. They had actually a couple big hits back in the day. And they were founded in '69. They were inspired by the retro band Sha Na Na. Okay, that's about it. Yeah, that's about it on that. The playing of the oldies in the soundtrack became part of a '70s trend where various recordings by the original artists were used to score a film. I think none better than Diner. If you ever saw Diner,
Yeah.
I thought that was phenomenal how they did that one. All right, there's little things like the dice on the thing were also used in the Star Wars Millennium Falcon. Okay, yeah, here's the one. The film was previewed before an audience of young people in San Francisco on a Sunday morning. Universal Pictures head Ned Tannen was in attendance. In a story that is now legendary in Hollywood, he was not impressed with the film despite a good audience reaction. He called it unreleasable. Francis Ford Coppola, enraged at the comment, offered to buy the film from Universal. Some accounts claim he offered to write the check then and there. While the exhausted, burned out, and ill at the time, George Lucas watched in shock. A compromise was finally reached in which Universal could suggest modifications to the movie, a resolution Lucas was not happy with as it took control of the film away from him. So they made some changes at the end. I want to talk about the ending because I think the ending is kind of important. What did you think of the way the film ended with that card on the end telling kind of the fate of everybody? You remember that?
Yeah.
All right, I'll tell you the fates of the four characters, and I'm not going to say the four main characters because I thought there were really six, but John Milner was killed by a drunk driver in 1964. Terry was missing in action in Vietnam in '64. In '65, Steve was an insurance agent still in Modesto, and Kurt was a writer living in
Canada.
the implication being to avoid the Vietnam War. Okay. Okay, thoughts on that?
What do you think you can?
Yes, that's true. But George Lucas did that. Yeah, Richard Dreyfuss came from Canada. So
Animal House had that same thing, at the end. They told
Animal House did that too, right? Which was John Landis. But that came out later than this, but yep.
It didn't say whether Steve married Lori. Was
It
my
didn't.
reaction- Was my reaction to Steve's history.
Right. Do you think he did?
We stayed in Modesto, so,
That was my thought. If he stayed there, he probably married her.
Mhm.
That would be my bet.
but it wasn't specific.
Right. But my thought on the ending was, well, of course, it says here, the film's impact on the coming of age genre is undeniable. Its influence can be seen in subsequent films. I think also was partly inspired by Rebel Without a Cause a little bit. It's a tamer version, but I think that may have helped inspire it too. Supposedly he was also inspired by Fellini's 8.5 about a director who couldn't get through to direct the movie, which is Kurt's character. What's he actually going to do? He can't figure it out until the last second. But to me, the film was mostly a happy movie until those end credits where you see two of them die.
Yeah.
So my thought was, again, it's made in 73, set in 62, and you always want to consider when the film was made, because that's the perspective on the setting.
Yeah.
So my thought was, it shows, it's like not the end of the character's innocence only, because they're on the cusp of becoming adults. The first stage of becoming adults is graduating high school, going to college on their own. And then two of them die. But it's also, to me, look at the timing, because Kennedy was assassinated the next year. It's like the end of America's innocence, according to George Lucas. That's my take on it. Where he puts that credit in at the end, where you see two of them died. One just became an insurance agent, who he's the one who had the big dream, supposedly, to go to college and make something. And the other one, who was on the fence about it, ends up moving to Canada. So it sort of puts a bittersweet tone to what seemed like a mostly fun, happy movie. So I thought that was kind of interesting. He put that on.
Adulthood brings reality.
Right, right. It shows, what happens with adulthood is it kind of ends the innocence, I think. So, yeah, that was a big part of it. Now I gotta find this part about Wolfman Jack, because I want to see who's the one who suggested him, because the key is this movie. This is a cute little note on Wolfman Jack. He makes an on-air prank call to Pinky's Pizza. The voice on the end at Pinky's Pizza was George Lucas's, so he didn't have to pay anybody else to, get a credit. Lucas was unable to pay all the crew members. He offered to give many of them screen credits in lieu of payment. They accepted. Traditionally, only department heads received screen credit at that time. Giving screen credit to so many crew members has now become a tradition, and it started now in this movie. And that's why closing credits are so long now, because everybody gets a credit. He kind of started it in lieu of paying. Now, when Charles Martin Smith pulls up on the Vespa, before he had a car, real or borrowed or imaginary, he crashes into the building. That was not scripted. He genuinely lost control of the bike, and Lucas kept the cameras rolling. Fortunately, the accident and the actor's reaction was in keeping with his character. Furthermore, the incident got the first big laugh from the audience in its first public premiere, which Lucas and friends took as a very good sign for the film. So many studios initially turned down the script because George Lucas wanted at least 40 songs on the soundtrack, which would obviously lead to a large bill over the rights. Universal finally agreed to fund the picture when Coppola, fresh off the success of The Godfather, came on board as a producer. Okay, here we go. Wolfman Jack was, this is only one of it, was specifically chosen by Lucas to play a role in the movie because Lucas remembered listening to him on the radio when he was in high school. But the thing where he was where Lucas was actually a DJ, was not in California. Here we go. I got it. Okay. All right. My bad. I should have said to everybody silence the phones. I forgot. Remember the group, the Pharaohs, that kidnapped Kurt for sitting on their friend's car or whatever, real or imagined? They may have made it up. The Pharaohs talk about mysterious DJ the Wolfman, speculating he was either broadcasting from an airplane or from a pirate radio station in Mexico. In fact, Wolfman Jack worked as a DJ from 1964 to 1966 for XERF Radio, an AM station, in Ciudad Acuña, Mexico, at the time a 250,000 watt radio station, powerful enough to reach much of the United States. It was known for interesting choices in music and DJs with a lot of attitude. It was considered a pirate radio station as it did not have to pay any FCC licensing fees, and because it could get away without paying royalties. Its outlaw nature led to it becoming the focus of a popular song by ZZ Top, Heard It on the X. I remember that song really well. Now, the other part of, they didn't have the budget to do a lot of things. They really didn't have a budget to pay Wolfman Jack, who already had launched Midnight Special, the TV show, the year before. So at this point, he was a celebrity. So Lucas made a deal with him. I'll give you 0.25% royalty on the movie. And he took it. And he was set for life from that. It was the most money he ever made. So I thought that was pretty cool. So that made Wolfman Jack a comfortably successful man.
I'm just reading
Sure.
his
Go ahead.
Wikipedia page. It's talking about his gravelly voice,
Mhm.
credited for his success, saying, "It's kept meat and potatoes on the table for years for Wolfman and Wolfwoman. Couple of shots of whiskey helps it. I've got that nice raspy sound."
I thought it was kind of cool that he was pretending he wasn't himself either, you know, when Kurt came to visit him. All right, I said some of the main characters represent different stages from Lucas's life. Kurt is modeled after his personality during USC, while John Milner is based on his teenage street racing junior college years. And Terry, his nerd years, specifically his bad luck with dating, which is kind of interesting. Now, the Fonzie character was added to Happy Days because of Paul LeMatt's John Milner greaser character was such a hit in American Graffiti. The creator of Happy Days, Michael Eisner and Gary Marshall, who created it, felt they needed a greaser character as well, so Fonzie was based on and inspired by John Milner. It was the only Best Picture Oscar nominee not to win any of the awards. Remember the scene? All right, remember the scene where John and Carol smeared shaving cream on the 1960 Cadillac? Paul LeMatt actually jumped onto and over the car during each take, and George Lucas became concerned that LeMatt's boots would put dents in the hood and trunk because the owner was sitting in the car. There's a lot of funny stuff in this. All right, so they actually filmed it in Petaluma, which wasn't too far from Modesto. And the road where they had the car race and where the Chevy crashed, it's actually in Petaluma. It's called Freights Road. A golf course now resides on the north side, but the field where the crash happened is still intact. Okay, so the reason that Universal didn't overly babysit the making of this movie is because after the success of Easy Rider in 1969, they came on the idea of letting young filmmakers make semi-independent films on low budgets in hopes of generating similar profits. The idea was to make 5 movies for $1 million apiece, or hopefully less, not interfere in the process and let the director's and give the director's final cut. The other movies besides this one was The Hired Hand, not a big one, the last movie, Taking Off, and Silent Running, which with Bruce Dern, which is a very good movie. Okay. Oh, so this was one of the rare films where the first movie was so fantastic. Does anyone know that there was actually a sequel to it called More American Graffiti? You can look it up. It's one of the worst movies ever made. Not just a sequel. It was a horrible movie. George Lucas wasn't involved with it, and it was just a disaster. The sock hop sequence was filmed in one day. There's something else about the plane. There's a story to the plane I want to find because I know it's kind of bizarre. Because the plane had a terrible fate, actually. Here, is this it? Yes, here it is. Okay. The DC-7 airliner, seen at the end of the film, was built in 1956, originally served with Braniff Airlines. After it appeared in the movie, it was converted into a firefighting air tanker for T&G Aviation. On October 9th, 1986, exactly 2 years before my wedding, it took off from Dakar, Senegal on a cargo run for the United States Agency for International Development. Its number 3 engine began smoking and the number 4 fire alarm went off. The pilot attempted to ditch at sea. All 4 aboard were killed in the accident. So that's what happened to the plane. But it was, 10 years after they made this movie, 13 years after they made it. George Lucas told film buddy and fellow director William Friedkin, who just passed away and made The Exorcist and French Connection, that American Graffiti was George Lucas's Amarcord, which was Fellini's movie, not 8.5. It was Amarcord, about a movie about young men on the eve of war, cruising around and pondering the meaning of the world in fascist Italy. And Friedkin said, "Is that how he sees this movie? My God, does he take himself seriously?" Thought that was kind of funny. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. Richard Dreyfuss had his forehead gashed after Paul LeMatt threw him into a swimming pool the day before his close-ups were to be filmed.
Oh my God.
Magic Carpet Airlines. That was the name. There it is. Oh, okay. So the plane, it had a flat tire on the left side, but it wasn't shown because they put a van near the stairwell that leads to the entrance to cover so you wouldn't see that the tire was flat. Filming of the climactic drag race was hampered when one of the cars broke an axle and then broke the replacement axle and then nearly ran over two cameramen lying on the road to film it. Okay.
Alan Ladd said he'd support Lucas in anything.
Yeah, well, he's a smart man. To finance this film, George Lucas approached his father, among others, for money, which he found troubling since he was raised to loathe going into debt, especially to his father, who only recently had coming around about his son's artistic career. Fortunately, the grand success of the film meant that Lucas had no trouble repaying his father, who was then proud of his son's success critically and commercially. No, that's just father. Yeah, I didn't see much about it. There is no actual old Harper. Remember the liquor he had? Terry the Toad had tried to get bought a couple times. The closest is I.W. Harper, Kentucky Bourbon Whiskey, which is now owned by Diageo. Harrison Ford's character. Oh, that's the other thing, right? That's the last thing I wanted to mention because it's a funny one. His character was named Bob Falfa after Robert Dalva, a USC friend and collaborator of George Lucas. But Harrison Ford almost wasn't in this movie for two reasons. And remember, he wasn't anybody famous at all at this time. So this was a pretty good part for him. But there were two things that he didn't like about it. First, they wanted him to cut his hair, like Butch Patrick. And he's like, I'm not cutting my hair. And he said, I'm not in enough scenes that it's worth it for me to cut my hair. So you remember in the movie, he's wearing a hat?
Yeah.
That's why. He came up with the idea, I'll wear a hat instead. And it was like a cowboy hat. And they're like, that's okay. It makes you look kind of rebellish. Good, you can go with it. But his scale was $485 a week, and it was 4 weeks of shooting. He said that wasn't enough. They raised it to $500 and he settled. $15 a week got Harrison Ford in the movie. The difference. So I thought that was it.
Who was the kid with the glasses?
Charles Martin Smith,
The little one.
Terry the Toad. Yeah, he's the one who did a lot of animal movies directing, and that's where he's been, I guess, stock and trade for years. Yes.
Has anyone thought of doing this? Perhaps they have, of putting this on the History Channel, getting the historical perspective of an era.
Great idea.
An era that is totally gone.
Yeah.
It's disappeared in the US. It's of great value to remember. And there's a question as to whether we have any producers today who would look at that era, recognize what it was worth. We only wish we have it today, and would do something to reassemble it.
Yeah. It's a great point. I think it would be a great special on the History Channel or National Geographic, even something like that.
Car accidents we already had.
Yeah, right. We just saw, Ann and I just saw Golda last night, which was set actually in the year this movie was made, 73.
Right.
It was about the
Where did you see it?
in Delray. We saw it in Delray. The Yom Kippur War.
Yeah.
And the whole movie focuses on how she handled the Yom Kippur War.
In
And-
Delray?
What?
It's in Delray?
Yeah,
That's where the movie is.
yeah, it's in other theaters too now, I think. But it was a special screening because they had an interview that they had recorded on video from a reporter from the Hollywood Reporter interviewing the director and Helen Mirren, who was cast as Golda, which interestingly, she's not Jewish, but the director totally defended her choice of casting. And he said, she's acting, it's okay.
You
Otherwise,
like your nose?
yeah, right, right. Yeah, she had a lot of work done because her ankles were swollen, her body was swollen. She
Except
had-
for her nose.
Right, well, they did a little on that too,
Oh,
in
did
spite of
they?
it, yeah. So,
But
but it's a good movie, very good movie.
now, has anyone done a movie called Nixon? Because
Well,
if you look at
Yeah,
historically, if you historically look at Nixon, I don't want to say anything nice about him, but he was a very good administrator.
Mhm.
He did a lot of very significant things for our democratic view of where we should stand in terms of our friends and enemies. And
well, he had a
look
lot
at
of
it-
help from Henry
Yeah.
Kissinger on
when
it.
you look at it today, and there are people who would say out there, well, if we ever didn't give him a pardon or this or that, some other things would be quite different. I would think somebody, unless you want to do it yourself, should get out there and do a real job on him.
Well, there was a good movie, Frost Nixon, which actually Ron Howard was involved with, and I urge you to see it. I'm gonna stop the recording now. I think we kind of covered it.
There is an opera called.
Oh, you know that,